So, you know, when you approach a score, when you approach a film, whether it's animated or live action, you put yourself in the mind and the souls of the characters. This one was extremely challenging. Tell us.
Yeah, and I, you know, for years I've always said, you know, it doesn't matter if it's a rat cooking in a kitchen or if it's Captain Kirk on the Enterprise. They're all real people to me, and they really are, especially when I'm working. But this film, they were real people. You know, this was a story. We were entrusted with the story of these people who went through this harrowing experience, and you know, that responsibility to be the one who has to give a voice to the, you know, it's the voice to the people who didn't make it. That was a very challenging thing. So every day when I'm writing, for me to write, I have to sort of put myself in their place. So to do that, I had to sit there and really imagine what that would be like to go through. And that was tough. That was tough.
And you remember this when you were growing up?
Yes, of course. I grew up in New Jersey, and I knew about this story. You know, yeah, New Jersey. You know, my sister who's here, she actually even wrote about it in her diary at the time. So this was a story that was so far-reaching, it's hard to even understand. You know, at that time there was no internet, none of that, you know, and still we all knew about this story. And then years later, for me to be sitting at my home with two of the survivors of the crash, that was, I can't even explain to you what that was like, to be able to talk to them after years of sort of having this inside of you and understanding this and knowing about this story. And you're always saying, oh my God, what would that be? How would I react in a situation like that? Well, here I was sitting with the people that actually did it, and I'll tell you one funny thing, actually. We were sitting there in Gustavo, one of the survivors, we were talking in a group, and one of the people in the group said, oh my God, I have to be on a plane tomorrow, I hate flying. And Gustavo's like, what are you talking about? Nothing ever goes wrong with planes. It's like, oh. And there's worse than, I mean, they have a sense of humor about it, and that's what was so beautiful about the whole experience of meeting them. But you could tell there was also, they're carrying the weight of their friends that didn't make it off that mountain. So.
The use of the chorus, tell us about that. You've used choral work before,
yeah.
Star Trek. Tell us about bringing it in. Tell us about what the words mean, the language.
You know, the language is Mapuche, which is an indigenous language from the Andes region, and it's really talking about Mother Earth, you know, and nature, and all of those things that they were surrounded by at the time. And the voices were really there to represent, as I said just a few minutes ago, to me, that was the voice of the people who didn't come down. You know, the choir was the voice of those who didn't make it off the mountain. And the previous, you know, stories have been told about this. You know, the book Alive, which was published years ago, which is a wonderful book, and Frank Marshall's movie Alive as well. And I think these the two films live in a very different space. Whereas one was telling the story of the survivors. This one is really about a more internal conversation with the folks who weren't able to make it, who aren't here to tell their story. So, and I thought that was a really interesting angle. And Juan Antonio Bayona and I, he was the director. I've known him for 20 years, and we've been friends for 20 years, and we both love movies and film scores, and we bonded over Superman. And I met him in Spain, and one night, and my girlfriend at the time, my now wife, Andrea, she points over, she goes, "That guy has a Superman shirt on. You should go talk to him." It was like a mom at a playground saying, "That kid over there is playing, he's got a Superman shirt, you like Superman, go." And then the next thing you know, like we were up till 4 in the morning talking about everything, Superman, Richard Donner, and all this stuff. And we just remained close friends throughout. So eventually we got to work together on Jurassic World. And then, which was a really wonderful time. I loved working with him on that. He's just such a true storyteller. Like he's one of the greatest. But one of the things he does is when he comes into town, when he's working on a movie, no matter what, he brings it over to me, and we watch it together, and I just give him my thoughts and notes and what I think about it, even if I'm not working on the film. And so the morning of the writers, before the writers went on strike, that morning, he came over with the film and we spent the day together. We watched the movie and we started talking about it. And again, I was not supposed to be scoring this film. I was just there looking at it. But I fell in love with the film so much. It was one of those things like, well, how do you not do this movie, you know? And the more we talked about it, the more it just sort of happened. And by the next morning, I was writing the movie. I was literally scoring the film the next morning.
Talk more about emotions than music.
Oh, we always only talk about emotions. We don't really talk about music. And the only musical sort of thing we did talk about was after the film was over, when I first watched it at the house. I said, "Here, come over to the piano. I'm going to show you something, what I'm thinking this film sounds like to me." And I went over to the piano, but instead of playing the piano, I just reached into the thing, grabbed the strings, and just came this kind of like harsh sound. And I said, this is what this, musically, if I had to tell you what this experience sounded like, this is what it sounds like to me. And it's bleak. It's not just filled with sadness and pity the whole time. That's not what was going through their minds when they were stuck there. It was about, how am I going to survive? Where am I? They had no idea where they were. They didn't know which direction to go. They tried all different things. And to me, it was just about that excruciating process of just putting one foot in front of the other every single day to see if you can find some way to get out of there.
There is one more story I want you to tell before we go.
Okay.
And it's my favorite story. It's about your big break involving a video game, a very big filmmaker.
Okay, here we
Go, tell it.
He's not that big. Steven Spielberg. I wouldn't be sitting here actually if it weren't for him. I was working as a producer at DreamWorks Interactive, and this was in the 90s. And I was producing a game called. It doesn't even matter what it was called. It never.
Jurassic Park.
No, I wasn't producing that, but I was producing a different thing. So downstairs they were producing The Lost World, Jurassic Park. Steven was shooting it at the same time, and he loved video games, and his kids were young at that point, so they were always playing video games together. Steven always, on the way into shooting, he would stop by DreamWorks Interactive and just see what's going on. Let's see what's happening. Or sometimes they could get a call the day before, and they would be like, "Oh, Steven's coming tomorrow, so he wants to see X, Y, Z." So one day, they got one of those calls from his assistant, and they said, "Steven wants to come and check out the new animation and see what you're doing with sound and this and that." Of course, I hadn't really figured a lot of the sound stuff out. So the producer of the game calls me. We had worked together over at Disney prior. And I was writing music at that time, but I was not making a living at it, that's for sure. And I was just doing it for fun. And he said, "Michael, can you write a piece of music for this animation thing we're going to show Steven tomorrow morning?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll do that." So I went home, wrote a piece of music, brought it in the next morning, handed it off, went to my office, thinking that was that. And a couple hours later, get a phone call, and it was Patrick, the producer, and he said, "Hey, can you come down here because Steven wants to talk to you?" And I was like, Stephen who? Seriously, because why would Spielberg call me? I was, and he goes, Steven Spielberg, our boss, he wants to talk to you. Can you come downstairs? So I was like, okay, I'll come downstairs. So I was like panicked, and I was like, what do I do? Okay, this way. Now, the building we were in, there was no, it was 2 stories, and there was an escalator. It was a really weird building in Bel Air. And there was an escalator, so if you wanted to go downstairs, you had to take this escalator. So I run over to the escalator, I get to the top, and I'm about to run down the stairs, and I see Steven Spielberg's at the bottom of the escalator, right? I was like, oh my God. And I had this crisis moment where I was like, do I continue running down the stairs, or do I stop and then just do one of these? I'm just like going down the escalator. And so I chose to just go like that. I was just like, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, you know, it's just so weird. I'm like Steven Spielberg, and I'm like, oh, this is like one of the shots in this movie. It's just like kind of talking into his face, you know? I thought I was crazy, but he put his hand out as I got close. He was probably like, why is this taking so long? Just like you are with this story. He was like, and he put it out, he shook my hand, he goes, I love that music you wrote. Are you gonna write the music for the whole game? And I was like, yeah, I would love to. And he was like, that was on a samples, on a synth, right? And he goes, well, we're gonna do it with a live orchestra. And I was like, really? We're gonna do it, right? And he was like, yeah, that's the way it should be done. And of course, for him, that is the way it should be done. It's how he's always done it. John Williams is so brilliant, and they've had that amazing relationship all these years. And I think about that often. I think if he had not said, well, there's a lot of things that had to happen that day for me to be sitting in this chair, but one of the things was, if he had not said, we have to do this with a live orchestra, they never would have paid for it, for a live orchestra for a video game, because at that time, they didn't want to pay the money for that. And we were now at a time in technology where it allowed us to put audio on the CD, because it was for a PlayStation game. So because of that, we recorded it with a live orchestra. Now listen, it wasn't like a giant orchestra like this, it was a 33-piece orchestra. And I remember my first thought was, how am I gonna make this sound like anything like Jurassic Park, as you know, with that size orchestra? And then I remembered, Max Steiner had 33 players when he did King Kong. And I was like, okay, if Max Steiner can do it, then I'm gonna try and do it too. Because King Kong was my favorite score of all time, and I was just like, you know. So that's how it all happened. So thanks to that crazy day, I'm boring you people here tonight.